So it's my story as a partner of a targeted parent. Todd is his name, and he got divorced in 2016 and they shared a son. When I met him in 2018, he had custody of his son, but he was a non-custodial parent, legal custody, and he had visitation 1 weekend a month. And we lived in California and his son lived in Idaho. The experience I had with his son coming to our home and visiting us and spending time with us was like nothing I'd ever seen. I have 3 adult children and I had a healthy co-parenting relationship, which was very fortunate. His son would come to the house and he would say things and do things that seemed so unusual and abnormal. But because it wasn't my child and I wasn't part of it, I really didn't invest too much energy thinking about it. In March of 2021, after 10 days of his son visiting us, which we had never had that much time, he decided to file for more visitation time, summer parenting time of 8 weeks. In retrospect, that was probably too much. Within days of her being served, things started shifting to the negative really quickly. He already had a hard time having phone calls, but he would still get them. They were short, they were disconnected, they were on speaker, but you would still get them. He started not getting his phone calls, started with, "Your son doesn't want to speak to you." She's never said that. He's busy or he can't take the phone call. So we get a voicemail and the little boy says, "I don't know why you keep calling me. I don't want to talk to you." We'd never had that because when he dropped his son off after 10 days of visitation, within 30 minutes of his son leaving his father, he said, "I had the best visit. I love you so much. I miss you already. I can't wait to see you again." And then now 3 weeks later, all of a sudden stopped contacting me. A few days later, we get a text message and it says, "I know what you've done. The police know, you will pay." And I said, well, I'm sure if it was something really bad, we would have somebody knocking on our door, right? No, the whole time I'm downplaying this. She's not stable. So I'm just her being unstable again. We speak with the family lawyer and she says, yes, there's some allegations, but we're not quite sure what's going on. We had planned to pick up his son on a holiday weekend and it was a big deal. And she would respond with, "Do not plan to come pick him up. You will not have your time with your son. I know what you've done." We plan to pick him up. We get on the plane, and as we're taking off, the lawyer says, "Do not show up at the house. You will be arrested. I need to figure out what's going on." So now we're like, okay, this is serious. Well, what she she filed a police report saying that he had physically abused their son while he was at my home in California for spring break. The allegations included him tossing him around, slamming him against the wall, sliding him under a bed, choking him. He had bruises everywhere. These horrific allegations of physical abuse, feeding him cactus that nearly killed him. Unbelievable. When the allegations actually came out, as a mother of 3 kids, I stopped and I said, what did I miss? Like, could I have missed something? And I was there the whole time. It was 10 days. And if I wasn't there, my son was there because we all lived together. And if my son wasn't there, his two older kids were there because he has 2 older teenagers from a prior marriage. So I considered every possible angle. And I am convinced in my heart of hearts that never happened, ever. We're in California. The state of California gets the allegations of abuse. They don't even investigate it. This is ridiculous. We had videos. They said, not going to do anything. We did not find out until later. She took him in for a forensic interview. And of course, this is our first time experiencing this, not knowing what it was. So she takes him in for a forensic interview. During the first forensic interview, he alleges that he was physically beaten, he was tortured, he was choked. He had this really weird story that he would slide him under the bed. And I thought that was so bizarre. So I went into the bedroom and I had my niece who was visiting, who was 7 years old, the same size, and I asked her to crawl under the bed. She can't even fit under the bed. I mean, So those allegations could have easily been unproven. He gets one phone call from the boy after he leaves, and now we're going on 2 months. We leave for a trip to Mexico for a wedding. Upon coming back into the States, he was arrested at the border. And we had no idea. We just didn't understand. Now, prior to us going to Mexico and prior to him being arrested, we started doing our investigation. We flew into Idaho and we said, we want to know about this forensic interview. We want to know about these allegations. Why have you not interviewed us? We have police recordings of him calling the police department saying, why haven't you asked my side of the story? Why haven't you interviewed my children? Why haven't you interviewed my fiance? How are you doing a one-sided investigation? Like, I just don't understand what's going on here. And the detective just saying, if there was something we need from you, we'll contact you. So we're assuming everything's great. We don't put the two together because we've been actively trying to figure out what's happening here. He gets arrested. I'm with my son. It's horrific. And he spends 12 days in jail. Before I leave the border, I said, do we need to get a lawyer? And he says, it sounds like he already has a lawyer for this. And then it all clicked. I'm like, there's more to this story than the police department's been telling us. So she has 2 older boys who were at the time 18 and 21. When California decided not to pursue charges against him of physical abuse, she then went to the state of Idaho. By the way, she used to work for the sheriff's department there and for the county jail. She's friends with everyone in the community. She's a part of the Mormon church, which is a very tight community. She went to the Child Advocacy Center there and said, I think my son was molested. Now, she recorded him 7 times. And in those 7 interviews, you hear her asking him, what happened? This happened? How did he beat you? How did he hurt you? What did he do? And every time he would say, no, that didn't happen. And every day she would interview him, the story would change. And we presented those to our lawyer, and he never used them in court. He separated when they were 2. So the last time he was in the household with the boy was when he was 2 years old. So in order to make an allegation of physical or sexual abuse, he had to have resided in the household. And so the boy said, when I was 2 years old, my dad changed my diaper and he rubbed his cheek on my penis. And they pressed charges against him for that. And then, of course, just as we thought, the prosecutor's like, there's not enough for us to do anything, so we're going to add 2 more charges. Her 2 adult children then came forward and said, when I was 8 years old, Todd laid in bed with me after a party and I felt violated. And during the preliminary hearing, our lawyer said, was he naked? And he said, no. Was he erect? No. So you have a man who's a stepfather, lays in bed with a child, presumably, and now he's charged with lewd and lascivious acts with a child under the age of 8. So then the second charge comes in. The oldest boy says, around the same time frame, when I was 10, I was in bed on my bunk bed. It was pitch black. There was no light in the room, and I felt something crawl and slither into the room. And I hid into the corner of the bed, and I felt a presence, and Todd presented himself. He attempted to stroke my penis while masturbating. So he got charged with that. Now, listen to he slithered into the room. It was pitch black. I was in the top of the bunk bed, hidden in the corner, but you managed to see him masturbating. When we told the judge this was out of a high conflict modification of visitation, he said, $100, he's out of jail. Basically released him on a $1,000 bond. And we proceeded to fight. We hired a lawyer. He said, oh, I have cases, I have experience. This is right up my alley. I know we can fight this. I want $20,000. Now, mind you, Todd doesn't have $20,000. At this point, there's 3 charges of lewd and lascivious acts with the minor on him and toward him, and so he has to do whatever he can. Our lawyer did a terrible job. Absolutely terrible. There was another lawyer that was going to charge us $50, which, in retrospect, we should have gone with that lawyer because we ended up paying $100,000 anyways for a lawyer that did absolutely nothing. We hired experts. We hired Dean Tong and we hired Alan Blatke. They coached our lawyer to be as prepared as possible for this trial. This should have been a 10-day trial. The trial started on Monday. We didn't actually go into proceedings until Tuesday, and it ended Thursday evening. Unheard of for the amount of allegations and the potential consequences of these allegations. And I remember just falling to the floor and saying, let's just escape. Let's just go. And he's like, nope, we're going to get married right after this. Literally tomorrow, we're just going to go and we're going to spend 10 days and we're going to just leave. And driving to that courthouse and hoping I was wrong and sitting in that courtroom. You think fear, like I can't even. And to see his kids, his older kids, you don't even, and as hard as it is for me, I couldn't imagine what he was going through. He was found guilty of 2 or 3 counts of lewd and lascivious acts with the minor. 8 hours of deliberation. His 2 older children were with me in the courtroom. You cannot imagine hearing that in a courtroom, knowing he's innocent, and his kids are with me, and she's on the floor, she passes out, and he doesn't move, and I'm trying to manage his emotions, our fear, and her, and his son stands up. On the opposite side of us, of the courtroom, was the other family, and they're clapping and they're applauding. And his son is there, the one that made the allegations, and he has this look of confusion on his face because he's 11. He doesn't understand what this means. When his 18-year-old son sees them applaud, he stands and he says, "What are you clapping for? You're just sent an innocent man to prison." And the bailiff escorts him out. Chaos ensues in the courtroom. Before we know it, Todd's gone, and you hear him being taken away, and he said, "All I wanted was more time with my son." We get kicked out. They try to arrest his son. It was horrible, horrible. And Todd says to us later, because the bailiff comes in and says, "We have the son and we're detaining him. Your Honor, would you like us to press charges?" And he says, "An innocent man was just found guilty. Let the boy go." So he knew. He knew. But it wasn't his choice. It was the jury. So I remember being in the hotel waiting for the verdict, and it was 8 hours. And he was so positive the whole time. He just kept saying, "Charity, there's no way anyone's going to hear this and think, oh yeah, this man's totally guilty, right? There's no way." As you start to proceed with trial, you realize our lawyers don't know what the hell he's doing. What are we going to do? And you know, now knowing what I know, we could have stopped and said, "Your Honor, I am not comfortable. My lawyer is not representing me appropriately. I asked for a new legal counsel." But at the time, you don't know that. You're at his mercy. Alan and Dean both gave our lawyer, 100 questions to be prepared for. He did not coach anybody. He did not sit with any of our witnesses and prepare them. He did nothing. One thing that they said was, until you educate the jury on parental alienation and the negative outcomes and how they came to this place, they're going to assume he's a sex offender because the kids said it. And if they don't know that the kids lie because this is what they've been trained to do, then they'll never understand. And our lawyer never, ever did that. She's done this before. She has alienated her 2 adult boys from his family. Her husband passed of cancer, and his brother came on the stand and said, she's done this before. She told me after my brother passed, "I know your father has molested my daughter, and if you try to spend time with my kids or have anything to do with them, I will take you to court." And he attested to this on the stand. So there's a pattern. Our lawyer didn't bring up the pattern of behavior. Apparently, If you're convicted of a crime and you maintain your innocence, you're punished for it. He had 100 personal impact statements to the judge about the kind of person that he was. People who have had a relationship with both him and his ex-wife and have said, there is no doubt in my mind she orchestrated this. There is no doubt in my mind these boys are pathological, sociopathic liars. They have lied their whole life. The middle son said his father was killed by the mafia when in fact he died from cancer, and to this day he tells people his father was killed by the drug mafia. There is something unhealthy about that. Since he was found guilty and we knew we were going to appeal, we asked for what's called a rider. A rider is a rehabilitation program where if you're a drug addict or a sex offender, that you are given the opportunity to be put through a rehabilitation program with a 3-year sentence, which is the best outcome for that, because then you're in more of a protected environment. So I said, if given the rider, I'm convinced he can be rehabilitated. So I didn't admit it, but I recognize that the court sees this as a conviction and I have to support that. The sentencing went badly because all the phone calls were recorded, and I said to the family, when you speak with Todd, don't talk about our strategy because all the phone calls are recorded. We had a family member on the ex-wife's side who's a huge advocate. And he said, there's a man named Scott who's friends with Todd and friends with the ex-wife. And he said, I am friends with the judge. I am going to personally tell him he got it wrong. Like, this is horrible. So I share this with a brother. He shares it with Todd on a recorded phone call. And then a family member says, I'm going to write a letter to the judge and I'll personally deliver it to him. They both got visits from the police department and said that they were trying to target a judge. He's like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm like, he can get life in prison. So sentencing day came and he got life in prison. And he got 25 years to apply for parole. He's 53 years old. He'll be dead in 25 years. He won't survive that. So he filed for appeal. It was only supposed to take 1.5 years, but it's now 2.5 years. The 3 allegations we talked about, there were text messages that we, as the defense, asked for text messages because we knew that in the text messages we would see communication with them and her manipulating the boys, because in one of the court documents she sends him a message and says, I need you to do what we talked about today. You know, I'll pay you for that. And then that's the same day he went to the police department and made an allegation. And he said, you promised to pay me, you haven't paid me. So then he would say, you know, this is what he did to me and you just let it happen. You only care about yourself. So he's the one who's the middle child who's very mentally unstable. It was a way for him to get what he wanted from her. And they used that and gave it to the jury. So there in those statements were other things that potentially swayed their decision about Todd outside of the actual presented evidence, which again was 3 statements. Because I had such a healthy co-parenting relationship, and he had a healthy co-parenting relationship with his first wife and the 2 older children, I didn't know anything about parental alienation. And when all this started, he started to tell me about it, but you don't wrap your head around it. And in retrospect, I have recordings and I see it all now. And you're like, wow, how differently things could have been if I had known then what I know now. The lawyer drove me to the hotel, and I try to be an incredibly compassionate person, and I said to him, how do you feel? And he cried. He said, I feel horrible, and now I'm mad. And at the time I wasn't mad, but now I'm like, you should feel horrible because you didn't do anything we asked. But at the time I was just, we need to fix this. He needs to get out by tomorrow. He won't survive this. And thinking in my head, like, we were just gonna erase it, like he's gonna say, you got it wrong, and it was gonna end. I went to be with his family and his kids, and my girlfriend flew from Florida and met me. I remember thinking before the trial, like, should I have somebody come with me in case I go home alone? And thinking, no, it'll be okay. And her coming home with me and just not knowing what to do. I had lost my job a few months before. I had lost my father a few months before. So I just felt like I lost everything within 90 days. And the pain, I was just unbearable. And I'm not a big person to begin with, but from that day until the 2 weeks where I started to actually feel like I came out of the fog, I probably lost 10 pounds. I would talk to him as much as I could. The only thing I can think about was he's being beaten, abused, tortured. There were so many things going through my head. How did this go wrong? My friend kept saying, you've got to find your new normal. I don't want to find a new normal. I want my old normal. I want my old life back. And I think for a year I was so depressed. And I'd never been depressed in my life. And I look back at my notes because I kept a journal, and I was so depressed. I'm not depressed. I'm perfectly fine. I'm finding my new normal. And I had started my Parental Alienation is Real channel, and I started to learn. I joined the program. And I'm like, I'm going to create change. I want to, in parallel of getting him out, I want to help other parents never go through this again. I remember thinking I couldn't see him for like 8 months because trying to get a visitation was just impossible, and seeing him for the first time and almost feeling like I didn't even know him anymore. Even though we talked every day, he'd lost 20 pounds. And throughout it all, he's so positive. It blows everyone's mind. And he said, the truth will prevail, and I will be out. And I will share my story, and the world will know, and this will never happen again.